There are a couple of things that the so-called non-flat earthers, which are basically the majority of the world's population, what the majority of these people get wrong about those people who believe that the world is in fact flat and a disk. Well, it's not a question of science, it's not a question of education, but I claim that it's a question of emotion and identity. I would like to explore it in this video. I would like to start off by giving you a very short historical background of the view that the world is flat, and then a couple of ideas of why actually trying to educate the flat earthers is actually, it doesn't work, and it's even counterproductive, and you shouldn't be doing that. And then I'm also going to tell you a couple of anecdotes and stories that are not related to the flat earth, but also to serious science, where people are also resisting to change their views despite evidence. Okay, it kind of is related to this as well. Well, back already in the 1800s, people started to believe. There were some people who said, well, actually, the world is really flat, even though it's been known to be a sphere already since the ancient Greeks a few thousand years ago. It's kind of surprising that then in the 1800s, it started to appear, and again in 1950s, and the so-called the Flat Earth Society was founded, and this was actually as a response because some people were critical of the NASA and of the space program. So they basically then voiced their criticism in founding this Flat Earth Society, and then it got a little bit quiet. But then with the internet in 2015 around, this is when the whole issue with the flat Earth started to re-emerge again, where over social media then people started to spread these views, and nowadays there is also a Flat Earth Society, and there have been surveys done that approximately 1 to 2% of the population apparently believe that the world could be flat. However, the researchers also say that there might be some kind of a protest voices as well, and they're just basically saying, it's flat, but even though they don't actually believe it. So there is, in any case, some doubt also concerning these statistics. It doesn't matter. There's still, even if it's less than 1%, quite a lot of people who kind of are questioning science in that respect, and maybe even their own senses, and just still maintain that the world is flat. So the question is, why is that, right? I've been thinking for a long time, because it's so evident this is actually not right, and still people believe something that's so evidently wrong. And as a matter of fact, there are psychological reasons to that. And one of the interesting views that I've found is the so-called the contrarian identity, and that is if you're kind of against a mainstream view, and even if you're a small group of people who are is basically against the mainstream view, this gives you identity, and also group cohesion. This basically means that within the group you're kind of holding together, a small group against the outside world, so to say, and this gives a lot of identity. And if you're now kind of trying to convince those people that by providing evidence that the world is indeed a sphere, well, it's not going to work, right? Because all of this evidence will be rejected and denied. If you show them pictures that the world is indeed a sphere, well, then of course the pictures are fake. If you basically provide evidence by scientists that the Earth is a sphere, well, then of course the scientists are also part of a big conspiracy. So it does not matter. It's not a question of evidence, because no matter what evidence you provide, it's always going to be rejected, because, and that's the interesting part, it is not a question of science, and it's not a question of evidence. It is a question of psychology and emotions. You have to understand the following. If you, nobody's going to just say, okay, well, actually, if you believe something and then there's evidence of the contrary, many people are not just going to drop their view overnight and they're just going to follow the new view. It's not going to happen. You've already invested too much emotional energy into your belief, and you're not just going to give that up, right? And especially not if also a whole social network is dependent on that. I mean, you're interacting with other people on this topic, you're sharing views, you're kind of fighting against the evil outside world, to use my words now, right? And this kind of creates an internal cohesion, and you're not just going to give that up quite easily. So, and that's why I think what the so-called the non-flat earthers get wrong about the flat earthers is is essentially, I think, that it's a scientific question, the question of evidence, but it's not, right? And so there is no point in trying to convince convince the flat earthers it's not going to work and it's pointless and it's meaningless, right? Because it's not about science, right? So we've seen something similar also in the sciences itself, where indeed scientists could not be easily convinced by new evidence. Also because they felt emotionally attached to their own theories. And we've seen this over and over again in the sciences. Yeah, let's stay with the Earth, for example. Alfred Wegener, back in 1912, he discovered basically that the continents are not static, but they're actually drifting, they're moving, and there was evidence for that. But he was ridiculed by other scientists. I mean, how can something big like a continent actually move? I mean, how crazy is that, right? And it took 50 years until the 1960s, until the mechanism of continental drift, plate tectonics, until that was clarified, and then it became mainstream science. 50 years, right? And before that, the view was not accepted, and he was even ridiculed. And the reason is quite as often, I mean, you're not just going to change your view around like that, especially if you've already, built a whole career, on a certain theory. If you imagine you're, teaching and studying and researching and writing books about a certain theory of your whole life, and then all of a sudden new evidence appears, you're not just going to drop your old theory because of that. I mean, because you're emotionally attached to it. So I'm trying to make it clear that this emotional attachment, despite evidence, is not only something that is in the issue, that's an issue with the flat earthers, but it can be found over and over again. I want to tell you another story here that one of my professors at the university told us students, a little story from his time. So the professor of a professor of ours, it must have been quite some time ago right now. This is actually a pretty sad story. Even though the whole classroom, university lecture hall was quickly laughing a little bit, it's actually it's not no laughing matter. It was a sad story. So it was like this, and here it's a little bit of biology. I mean, there was this, the professor from a professor has been studying the so-called the blue-green algae for his whole life. The so-called the cyanobacteria. It's biological stuff. And those cyanobacteria, or the blue-green algae, are actually not algae, right? They're bacteria, and that's why we call them now cyanobacteria. Doesn't matter. In any case, even on the retirement speech, the professor was basically maintaining that the blue-green algae are actually really algae. And we were told that the whole lecture hall with students and professors, they were all already rolling their eyes. I mean, everyone knows that they are not algae, and gee, the old professor over there, yeah. However, this discovery that blue-green algae are not algae was so, he got so emotional about that, right, the professor, that he actually got ill. And that's how the story continues. He got so ill that he nearly died because of that. And this was, we quickly, as a lecture hall, in the lecture hall, the students, we quickly had to laugh because of what, he took it so seriously. He even got ill because of that. But again, this is actually nothing funny, right? If you have essentially invested your whole life studying something, and then all of a sudden there is a change in new scientific discoveries, and then your whole worldview collapses. And you feel like you've wasted your life really studying the wrong thing. I mean, that's painful and that hurts, right? So it's not a question of science here. Again, it's a question of emotions, and that's, I think, one of the reasons as well why flat earthers, once they've invested so much energy and time and emotions into the flat Earth view, you're not going to give that up, right? And I'm talking about those people who actually really believe that the world is flat. Of course, there are many followers who are taking the whole thing as a little bit as a joke, so to say, and you're not taking it seriously. Let's exclude those. But let's simply talk about those people who really believe that, right? And you've got this with a lot of things. I mean, with a lot of conspiracy theories and so on. People have invested a lot of time and energy and emotional energy into a certain view. They have got all of the friends, and then the social community and the networks that they have, and yeah, just giving up that view would mean that all of this would kind of break away and fall away. And that's why you cannot give it up. And that's why I'm also saying to the non-flat earthers, don't try to convince those people. It's not going to work, because it's ultimately not a question of evidence. It's not a question of science, right? So that's simply something I wanted to share with you. There is a comments section below, I would like to hear what your view is on this whole issue. I wish you all the best, and bye-bye.